Between helping customers at my boutique, I got a text from my husband. I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. I've already emptied our joint account. Haha. I didn't shake as I read it. My voice stayed steady as I helped Mrs. Peterson pick out a scarf. The only sign that my 12-year marriage had just ended was a slight tightening around my eyes. After Mrs. Peterson left, I calmly typed my response. Good luck. My name is Claire, I'm 38, and my husband, Mark, thought he had pulled off the perfect escape. He probably imagined me crying over his betrayal. Instead, I locked up my boutique for the day, unfazed. The signs had been there for months: late nights at work, secretive phone habits, sudden trips to the gym. 3 months ago, I found a dinner receipt for 2 on a night he claimed to be working late. That same night, I opened a separate bank account. When he suggested merging our finances, I agreed, but secretly moved my savings elsewhere. The joint account he just emptied? It only had enough to keep him from getting suspicious. The rest of my money was safe, along with detailed records of his shady transactions. Another text came in. Don't bother begging. Melissa and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later. Melissa, the young receptionist from his office. I had met her at the company Christmas party. Noticed how she laughed too hard at Mark's jokes. How she touched his arm when she thought no one was looking. She was young and naive, thinking she was special. I didn't reply. Instead, I called my lawyer, whom I had consulted months ago after spotting hotel charges on our credit card. It's time, I said. The papers are ready, she replied. Want me to have him served in Miami? No rush, I said. Let him think he's won first. Mark sent another text. I know this must be hard for you. You're not getting any younger. After all, at least you have your little shop to keep you busy. My little shop, the boutique I built from scratch, which made more money than his middle management job. The same boutique whose profits I kept separate from our joint finances. I smiled, knowing the legal documents heading his way would be a rude awakening. I spent the evening in my house, the one I inherited from my grandmother, which I had wisely kept in my name. Mark had often pushed to add his name to the deed, but I never did. Another smart move. That night, I found our wedding album. Mark looked so different back then, before his midlife crisis turned him into a joke. Now, he wore clothes too tight for his softening belly and tried too hard to fit in with his younger coworkers. More texts flooded in, each one more arrogant than the last. Melissa understands me in ways you never could. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll find someone more your age. I already told my family. They agree, we just grew apart. I took screenshots, adding them to my evidence folder. Then came the final message. By the way, I used the joint card to book our flights and hotel. Consider it my parting gift. LOL. Perfect. I called the credit card company. I'd like to report fraudulent charges. The representative's tone turned serious. Can you identify the charges? 2 first-class tickets to Miami, a hotel reservation at the Royal Palm. Also, I need to remove my husband as an authorized user. Do you have proof of fraud? Text messages from my husband admitting it. The agent canceled the charges. The next morning, Mark and Melissa would arrive at the airport to find their tickets invalid. Their hotel reservation? Canceled. Mark sent another text. Don't worry, I'll let you stay in the house until you find something smaller. I actually laughed out loud at that one. Did he really think he had a claim to my house? Then another. I know the shop means a lot to you. We can work out a fair payment for your half. My half of the business I built with my own money? The business he once called a hobby? I poured a glass of wine, the good stuff, saved for a special occasion. This qualified. By morning, the angry texts started rolling in. What the hell did you do to our credit card? The airline won't honor our tickets. The hotel canceled our reservation. Answer me. I silenced my phone and went to work. Life goes on, even when your husband runs off with a girl young enough to be his daughter. Around noon, Mark's mother called. Claire, dear, Mark told us everything. He says you're being vindictive, causing problems with his travel plans. I put her on speaker while setting up a window display. Did he mention emptying our joint account, or using our credit card for his trip with Melissa? Silence. Then, well, he said you left him no choice. You've been cold and distant. Barbara, I have his texts. Would you like me to read them to you? Another pause. He did seem a bit cruel. I told him that message was inappropriate. I appreciate the call, but I think it's best if we end this conversation. My lawyer has advised minimal contact with Mark's family during the divorce proceedings. Proceedings? Already in motion. Goodbye, Barbara. By afternoon, news spread through mutual friends. Apparently, Mark and Melissa were stuck in a cheap motel near the airport. His credit cards? Maxed out. Another red flag I had noticed months ago. Later, my lawyer called. The emergency hearing is Monday. Given his admission of draining the joint account and the credit card fraud, we're in a strong position to freeze his remaining assets. Has he been served yet? Not yet, but he'll get the papers at his new motel address. Speaking of which, Melissa had been posting their adventure all over social media, more evidence for my case. That evening, Mark sent another text. You think you're so smart, but I made copies of the boutique's financial records. Half that business is mine. I forwarded it to my lawyer. Let him learn the hard way about separate assets. By Monday, Mark showed up in court wearing tight designer jeans and a desperate smile. Melissa waited outside, looking awkward under the courthouse lights. My lawyer calmly presented our evidence, his texts, his fraudulent charges, his hidden expenses. Each piece was a nail in his legal coffin. Mark had spent months planning his great escape. He never realized I was planning mine, too. And I had one. Your Honor, Mark's lawyer began quickly. My client admits he made some rash decisions, but Mrs. Harrison's actions were harsh and unfair. My client was smart, not unfair, my lawyer replied. She protected her business and kept detailed records of her husband's suspicious actions. That's not harsh, that's smart. The judge looked at my documents, the house deed in my name, the boutique papers, and the financial records showing I kept business and personal money separate. Mark always hated that. Mr. Harrison, the judge said, looking at Mark, you admitted, in a text message, that you emptied a joint account and used shared credit cards to take a trip with your girlfriend. Do you deny this? Mark shifted nervously. I was just trying to move on. By committing financial fraud? The judge raised an eyebrow. Now you're asking for property that clearly belongs to your wife and was kept separate from marital assets. But the business grew during our marriage, Mark's lawyer argued. The business started before they married, my lawyer said firmly, and Mrs. Harrison kept all finances separate. We have records of every penny invested and earned. I glanced at Mark. He had thought this would be easy, take our money, run off with his girlfriend, and get half my business in the divorce. He never understood why I kept everything so carefully recorded. He used to call me obsessive. The court finds evidence of financial misconduct, the judge announced. All shared assets are now frozen. Mr. Harrison must return any money taken from joint accounts within 24 hours. But that money's gone, Mark protested. We spent it on. Then find a way to replace it, the judge interrupted. Also, the court disapproves of using shared credit cards to pay for trips with a girlfriend. Outside the courthouse, I heard Mark's girlfriend, Melissa, ask about their Miami trip. His answer faded as I walked away, heels clicking on the marble floor. I was heading back to the business he had never respected. Over the next few weeks, Mark became desperate. He claimed the boutique was his idea and said he'd invested money in it. He even tried to say he was my business partner. My records proved him wrong every time. He's getting desperate, my lawyer told me. Melissa's social media shows they're now living in her small apartment. It seems life on a receptionist's salary isn't as glamorous as Mark expected. Mark's family started calling me, their tone much softer than before. We had no idea, his sister Amanda said. He told us you were cold and controlling, but then we saw his texts, bragging about taking your money. That's not the brother I thought I knew. Even his mother called, crying. He said terrible things about your age, about replacing you with someone younger. I raised him better than that, or at least, I thought I did. I let their calls go to voicemail. Their support might have mattered weeks ago, but now, it just felt like they were abandoning a sinking ship. Meanwhile, my boutique thrived. The local gossip brought curious customers who often bought more than they planned. My ex tried the same thing. One woman told me while buying a designer handbag, thought he'd take everything in the divorce. Men like that never think we're smarter than them. Mark's text still popped up sometimes, swinging between anger and pleading. You've ruined everything. I never meant to hurt you. Can't we work something out? That business would be nothing without my support. I forwarded every message to my lawyer without replying. Let Mark dig his hole deeper. Through friends, I heard Melissa was having second thoughts. Sharing her tiny apartment with a middle-aged man who couldn't pay his own bills wasn't as fun as she'd imagined. She started posting about toxic relationships online. Yesterday, she removed her relationship status, my lawyer told me with a chuckle during an update call. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for Mark. Almost. But then I remembered his haha text after draining our account. The cruel jokes about my age, how he thought I'd be helpless without him. Instead of pity, I felt pride. Pride in my careful planning, pride in my strength, pride in protecting myself when Mark underestimated me. At the final divorce hearing, Mark was no longer cocky. Panic showed in his eyes. Melissa wasn't there, she'd moved on to a coworker her own age. Mark wore his old clothes, the designer wardrobe returned to help repay the money he'd stolen. His lawyer looked tired from trying to find loopholes in my records. Your Honor, Mark's lawyer tried one last time. Despite the property documents, my client supported his wife's business emotionally. Emotionally? My lawyer interrupted. Like these text messages where he called the boutique a little shop? Were these social media posts calling it a hobby? The judge had heard enough. The final settlement matched my careful planning. I kept my house, my business, and my separate assets. Mark got his personal items and his car, though it was worth less than he owed on it. You've destroyed me, Mark hissed as we left the courthouse. I have to move back in with my parents. No, Mark, you destroyed yourself, I replied calmly. I just made sure you couldn't destroy me too. His mother waited outside, ready to drive him to her house, his new home at 45 years old. The man who had mocked my age now lived in his childhood bedroom. You planned this all along, Mark accused. You knew this would happen. No, I said, I just paid attention. And unlike you, I knew the importance of keeping good records. His mother stepped between us. That's enough, Mark, you've embarrassed yourself enough already. As they walked away, I heard her scolding him. What were you thinking? Emptying bank accounts? Sending those awful texts? Honestly, Mark. I watched them disappear into the parking lot, feeling only relief. Mark thought his cruel text had written the end of my story. Instead, it had only triggered the next chapter, the one where I moved forward without him. My phone buzzed, not from Mark, but from notifications, new orders from my boutique's website. Life was moving forward, just not in the way Mark had imagined. My boutique success brought unexpected attention. Local business magazines wanted to feature my story, not as a scorned wife, but as a smart businesswoman who protected her interests. Young entrepreneurs often asked for advice. I told one young woman, who reminded me of Melissa, the best protection is preparation, and always trust your instincts. Mark's mother called sometimes, usually after he'd done something reckless. He had tried online gambling and joined a pyramid scheme, hoping for quick money, but each attempt only made things worse. I don't know where we went wrong with him, she sighed during one call. We offered to help him if he took responsibility, but he still blames everyone else, you, Melissa, his company, even the judge. I listened politely but stayed distant. Their family problems were no longer my concern. My life had moved forward. I was planning to open a third boutique and possibly expand into luxury accessories. The only reminder of Mark in my life was a framed screenshot of his last text before I blocked him. Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age. Below it was my latest business award, a reminder that success is sometimes the best revenge. A year after the divorce, I hosted the grand opening of my third boutique. The local media came, but this time, the story wasn't about my failed marriage. It was about my growing brand. Mark's betrayal was now just a footnote in my success story. During the event, Melissa unexpectedly walked in. She looked younger than before, or maybe I just felt stronger. She clutched her purse nervously. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. I believed everything he told me, that you were cold, controlling, and didn't support his dreams. But then he tried the same manipulation on me. When things got tough, he blamed everyone but himself. I adjusted a display of designer sunglasses. Those weren't dreams, Melissa, they were escapes. There's a difference. She nodded. I see that now. He tried to move in with me after you froze the accounts. He thought my small apartment would be temporary, but after 2 weeks of complaining about my tiny closet and suggesting I take out a loan for a bigger place, I understood what you meant about the difference between dreams and escapes. I chuckled. Let me guess, he had big plans, but no way to fund them? Exactly. Everything would work out once his investments paid off or he got that promotion, or when his cryptocurrency finally increased in value. She shook her head. I'm dating someone my age now. We have student loans and a small apartment, but at least we're building something real. After she left, my assistant manager whispered, was that the girlfriend? No, I replied. That was just another woman who learned the same lesson I did. I gestured toward a young couple looking at handbags. Now, let's talk about your idea for expanding our accessories line. My boutique had become more than a business. It was a symbol of independence, resilience, and preparation. Young entrepreneurs often asked for advice, and I always stressed the importance of protecting their assets. Mark's mother called one last time, not to talk about Mark, but to thank me. You taught our family an important lesson, she said. We stopped making excuses for his behavior. Mark still lives at home, still blaming everyone else, but we're not defending him anymore. That's your legacy, showing us the difference between helping someone and enabling them. I thought about that as I reviewed plans for a fourth boutique. Mark had tried to tear me down, but instead, he pushed me to become even stronger. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my lawyer. Mark filed another petition to revisit the settlement. The judge dismissed it immediately and ordered him to pay court costs. Thought you'd enjoy that. I smiled, picturing Mark in his childhood bedroom, still trying to rewrite an ending that had already been decided. 2 years after Mark's text, I received an invitation to speak at a women's business conference. The topic wasn't about divorce, it was about building and protecting a successful business. During the Q&A session, a woman asked, "My husband says I'm being paranoid for keeping my business finances separate. He says marriage means sharing everything. What do you think?" My ex-husband said the same thing, I replied, right up until he tried to claim half my business during the divorce. Trust your instincts. Protection isn't paranoia. My boutique chain had grown to 5 locations, each more successful than the last. The little shop Mark had mocked now employed 30 people and had been featured in national magazines. Through mutual friends, I heard that Mark had finally moved out of his parents' house. He was living in a small apartment above a garage and had taken a lower-paying job after his company downsized. His dating profile still said young at heart, though his photo was clearly outdated. Ironically, Melissa had become a regular customer at my first boutique. She had earned a business degree and started her own social media consulting company. "You inspired me," she told me one day. "You showed me that women can build something lasting instead of chasing empty promises." At the 5-year anniversary celebration of my original boutique, I stood in front of my employees and loyal customers. The once small shop had become the flagship store of a thriving business empire. To my surprise, Mark's mother attended the event. She approached me after the crowd thinned. "I saw Mark yesterday," she said, smoothing her designer dress, one she'd bought from my store. "He was talking about his glory days and the life he could have had. He still doesn't understand that he didn't lose everything in the divorce, he threw it away." I thought about his cruel text, the words meant to break me, but instead, they had become my motivation. Each boutique was proof of what women can achieve when they stop holding themselves back from men who fear their success. As I explained the store's new inventory system to a young saleswoman, coincidentally named Melissa, I caught my reflection in the window. I saw what Mark had failed to see 5 years ago, not a woman getting older, but one growing wiser, stronger, and more successful. That framed text in my office was no longer a reminder of pain, it was a reminder of how far I'd come. Below it hung a sign that read, "Success is the best revenge."